How many of you guys happen to remember something that happened so long ago, tens of thousands of years ago, in the internet years? But how many of you remember this guy?
It's hard to confuse everything.
But still, it's better to be, you want to kill him with kindness, remember?
That's right. What?
They actually have people filming you the whole time.
Cool.
I say kill with kindness.
Guess what? Hey.
Destruction of private property. It's against the law.
Somebody gets raped by somebody. And they're like, I'm a 16-year-old and I can't have this baby. Think you should keep it?
It's a baby.
Yeah.
If someone is raped and she gave birth and she decided to kill her 3-year-old child.
I meant to get your phone. Meant to take your phone.
Do not touch me.
Ah, yes. If anything screams tolerance of a woman and her right to choose, as these people so claim to be, pro-choice, nothing screams I accept your opinion like a roundhouse kick to the fucking body. This man has gone by many names, one of which stands out above the rest as Cuck Norris. Cuck Norris, that's good. And as you can tell, his tongue is hanging out, which means he's really concentrated on landing this kick. But like any middle school kid who immediately realizes they fucked up way more than they intended to, he goes with the, I meant to kick your phone. But it just wasn't good enough. Because you see, Cuck Norris here was immediately fired from his job. It has been brought to our attention that Jordan Hunt, aka Cuck Norris, has been caught on camera assaulting an innocent bystander at a pro-life rally. We do not condone his actions, and he has been let go. We believe that everyone has a right to an opinion and the right to voice their opinion without fear of physical violence. Notice how they just left out the fact that this male feminist, this pinnacle of leftist tolerance, assaulted a woman. Hashtag believe her. But let's take a look here at an interview that was conducted with the Kick-E, the Kicked Party, and see what she has to say.
I have received death threats and
Death threats?
just yeah, I mean, it's I'm not surprised because
Anyone else hear that? That's how you doing. Throwing fire. Move it, move it. I'm bringing. Be careful. Let's all make it home tonight.
Nice check, I see.
Let's go, let's go.
People are just so adamantly pro-abortion.
So this woman here has received death threats from the pro-choice crowd. Funny, isn't it, that pro-choice means you are able to choose to get an abortion, but if you choose to support life, you're choosing to get death threats and assaulted. Pro-choice and defenders of women, obviously. So due to copyright, I'm going to have to kind of stagger this interview, so we're going to skip ahead to her telling the reporter from the Rebel, which is why I'm worried about copyright, her telling the reporter from the Rebel what started all of this, what Jordan was doing.
And so he began to take out markers and draw on the signs, and then I warned people to shield their signs, and he began to draw on the backs of 5 people, including a 10-year-old girl, and so, which prompted me to take out my phone and begin to record him.
And by the way, what was he drawing? What were those marks?
Lock and load.
Markings about?
Oh, they were just scribbles.
Oh.
Yeah. And I began to record him. I went up to him, and then you can see the video commences. He's upset that I'm recording him, and I tell him that he's breaking the law, and he challenges me by giving me the scenario of a pregnant 16-year-old from rape. And I begin to answer him, and during my answer, he positions himself. He kicks me. He kicks me in the shoulder. My hand goes flying, or my phone goes flying, and then I started yelling for someone to call the cops. Someone comes to call the cops, and before he runs away, he grabs a ribbon off my chest that was pinned there, and he runs away.
So he starts drawing on people, signs, and children.
Those markings about?
Oh, they were just scribbles.
Just a my proceeds to start drawing. I mean, we know
My chest that was pinned there.
Let's go.
And he runs away.
So he starts drawing on people, signs, and children defacing property. I mean, we know that these people don't give a fuck about property. They're very happy to destroy whatever they can get their hands on. So he then proceeds to start drawing over signs, people, and children, kicks this woman in the shoulder, sends her phone flying. Then when she's down, he grabs her chest and a pin off of her chest and runs away. Imagine my bemusement when this is just another male feminist going after a woman who disagrees with him on nothing more than the right for someone to choose not to get an abortion. But this is all stuff we pretty much knew.
Let's go.
Just a refresher course, more or less. So what happened to him since then? Has anybody figured out what happened to Jordan Hunt, aka Cuck Norris? Well, the Toronto police did arrest Jordan Hunt, the man accused.
Go, go, go.
Y está.
Counter-terrorists win. Escorting the hostages. Let's go. Flashbang.
Gomaha.
Coming out. Terrorists win. Grab your gear, let's go.
Accused.
Her 3-year-old child.
Accused, right. Not that he was on video. He was just accused of it. But it does not start there. Hunt has been accused of doing this before to women. The police statement also alleged that Hunt was involved in a similar incident in August while riding a bicycle. Hunt allegedly approached a group of activists in Toronto and tried to take away one of their signs. When the protesters fought back, Hunt pushed one of the women into a fucking pole and then ran away. So that we know of, this man has assaulted 2 women in public for daring to disagree with his particular brand of leftism and woman empowerment. Nothing says, I support women, like beating the shit out of them and throwing them into poles when they don't agree with you. Wavy Web Surf did a pretty in-depth video about this. I'm going to grab this clip from his video, and if you want to go check out his video, he goes into a lot of the tweets and stuff like this. He was the inspiration for me making this one. So I suggest you go check him out. But this is an interview from the studio owner, I believe.
Let's go, let's go.
That Jordan used to work at.
And since then, our studio has been receiving hundreds of emails, texts, messages, some positive, a lot of negative, a lot of threats against our business, against us personally. It's affecting people booking. People are booking fake appointments. They're taking up valuable studio time of our stylists.
As the manager of Noble Studio 101, I have spent the past few days dealing with thousands of calls, texts, and messages from around the world regarding the actions of a former employee. Fake appointments and threats against our business, as well as hate-filled messages attacking our values and motives, have been the theme of many of these correspondences. I would like to thank you all for the support we have received and ask anyone attacking us to please allow us to conduct our business in peace and safety. We did not ask for this intention. We are a collective of hardworking individuals simply supporting our families. Please respect this. I mean, yeah, fair enough. That's all well and good.
Let's move out.
Good. It's not the employer's fault that they employed a scumbag who likes to beat up women. So no, they probably shouldn't be taking any flack for this guy's actions. I mean, they did fire him, so I don't know what else people want from them. I'm going to steal one more clip from Wavy Web Surf here, guys. Make sure you go check out his video.
See, check this clip out right here, because it's pretty crazy. He almost pushes an activist in front of a moving vehicle.
You can't harm somebody else. You can't get physical. You can disagree with somebody's message.
If you walk out into the world and harass people, then you get harassed back.
I got it. When women talk about women's
tried to take that
rights.
away from you. Tried to take all your pamphlets away from you. Arguably, that is wrong. Yeah, I tried to knock your stupid billboard on the sign.
Okay.
So if you don't want me to fuck with your stuff, why are you deciding to fuck with other people's choices?
So now we have 3 separate incidents involving Jordan Hunt attacking people for their political beliefs. Some would say he has a little bit of a violent history. Newsweek would say he has a little bit of a violent history. So let's make a count here. We have him, number 1, pushing a woman or attempting to push a woman in front of a moving car. Number 2, pushing a woman into a pole after taking her sign and shredding it. Number 3, roundhouse kicking a woman with her phone out because she
Move it, move it.
dared speak up for women who might not want an abortion. Meanwhile, only being charged for number 3, he faces a cacophony of 7 other charges for the same incident as number 3. So while he did make his $500 bail same day as he turned himself in, he still faces 8 charges regarding the incident. And as a condition of his bail, Hunt's bail order forbids him from being within 500 meters of any organized pro-life demonstration and contacting or being within 200 meters of 10 individuals, most of them involved in the Life Chain incident. So he has a court-ordered restraining order not allowing him to be anywhere near anyone pro-life because he is so fucking dangerous. Oh, and not to mention, he has a restraining order from contacting his salon manager. Well, ex-salon manager. I bet he threatened to kick her too because she fired him. If I was that salon manager too, I would get a restraining order as well. Supposedly, they were getting threats from the far right and the far left. The far left was threatening the salon for firing this maniac. So this is just a little bit more, well, more than a little bit more information than Wavy's video had. I deliberately excluded the Twitter account that Wavy used because it did turn out later that that was a parody account.
people.
It wasn't really him, but I doubt Wavy knew that at the time of him recording his video. So as of now, he has 3 restraining orders, 8 charges, and 4 accusations of physical violence. Jordan Hunt has 13 restraining orders, 13 restraining orders, 8 charges, and 4 accusations of physical violence against women. If that doesn't scream male feminist, I don't know what will. Guys, remember to head over to the Patreon or the PayPal to support me in my crusade against fucking male feminists. Oh my god. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video and you want to hear more similar to it, please
Cześć, tutaj Tomek Kopyra z blogu blogkopyra.com. Ze mną Marcin Chmielarz, popularny mason, czyli dzisiaj Jabberwocky pub i browar, a kiedyś najstarsi górale tego nie pamiętają.
Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. Today brings us quite a bit of news, from an upcoming GTX 1660 Ti, which may sound familiar if you've been following the channel, to a 14-core i9 99. XE. But first, check out today's sponsor, Massdrop. They're a group buy website with some amazing deals on gaming hardware. Because I did it, calling it the deal, saying it'll be called the GTX 1660 Ti. Not only that, but video cards learned some of its specs. According to them, it will still include 6GB of GDDR6, as well as no RT or Tensor cores, which we all mostly assumed was the point. But instead of the 1920 CUDA cores in the RTX 2060, it actually comes with 1536 CUDA cores. Yeah, that's a 20% decrease, which is definitely not small. I mean, yeah, the 3GB variant comes with fewer cores, but this already has no RT or Tensor cores, which should definitely help to bring the cost down for a cheaper model. With that said, it does make some sense at least. If they do end up releasing GTX variants across the board, they'd likely cannibalize ray tracing to the point where no game comes with it, ultimately screwing the early buyers of their RTX variants. Of course, this is ultimately just a rumor, though video cards is about as reliable as it gets, plus there could be something we're not seeing, like the potential for higher clocks now that the cores for ray tracing are gone. Who knows? The next story for today brings us over to AnandTech, who shared a really weird rumor. Specifically, that they've heard from multiple sources about a new 14-core Intel i9 CPU with a boost clock of 5 GHz. It's called the i9 9990XE, and if you
Go. Laying down smoke.
Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're going to be testing a new feature that Nvidia has just enabled in their latest drivers, and that's support for FreeSync monitors. This was first announced at CES
Seems like a good idea. Right, guys?
...2019 to the surprise of the community, I think. I'm not sure many people were expecting NVIDIA to back down from their G-Sync tower, but they have. And finally, those with NVIDIA GPUs can now use adaptive sync with a wide range of FreeSync monitors. Now you might be thinking, wide range? That's not right. NVIDIA only announced that 12 monitors would be supported, but that's actually not the case. NVIDIA's announcement of this feature was a little misleading in my opinion, so I'll do my best to clarify it here. NVIDIA's support for adaptive sync displays now comes in the form of 4 tiers. Yes, 4 tiers, so it's pretty confusing. At the top is G-Sync Ultimate, the new name for G-Sync HDR. Monitors that are G-Sync Ultimate certified have NVIDIA's G-Sync HDR module inside and support basically the full suite of HDR features. G-Sync Ultimate monitors include the Acer Predator X27, the ASUS ROG Swift PG27UQ and the new HP Omen X Imperium 65. One step down is regular G-Sync. These are the monitors that we've had for many years now that include a G-Sync module but don't support G-Sync HDR. These are the adaptive sync monitors that have always worked with NVIDIA GPUs and NVIDIA GPUs only, and the ones that command a higher price tag than their FreeSync counterparts. Then we get down to G-Sync compatible monitors. These are FreeSync monitors that NVIDIA has certified to pass their strict G-Sync performance metrics. They don't have a G-Sync module, but they do support the VASE
Time for talk's over. Let's do this. Decoy's out. Sniper.
Adaptive sync standard, so they also work with AMD GPUs. With the latest NVIDIA drivers, these monitors now work with adaptive sync on NVIDIA GPUs, with adaptive sync enabled by default. So far, NVIDIA has announced that 12 monitors are G-Sync compatible. You can see the list here. If you own any of these monitors and install the latest driver, adaptive sync will be enabled automatically, and you can use it just like you would with any other G-Sync monitor. NVIDIA claims that G-Sync compatible is still inferior to regular old G-Sync. They have this table here showing that G-Sync monitors are certified with more image quality tests, have a full variable refresh rate range, variable overdrive, and are factory color calibrated. However, there is really no reason why a G-Sync compatible monitor couldn't also be factory calibrated or have a full variable refresh rate range. NVIDIA just isn't requiring these things for the monitor to receive a G-Sync compatible sticker, while G-Sync monitors must have those features. There's also a fourth tier that NVIDIA only talks about briefly, and that's the ability to use any FreeSync or VASE adaptive sync monitor with an NVIDIA GPU via a toggle in in the NVIDIA control panel. NVIDIA claims that this is for VRR, or variable refresh rate monitors, yet to be validated as G-Sync compatible, and says that when enabling the feature, it may work partly, or it may not work at all. And of course, NVIDIA wants you to think you have to purchase a G-Sync compatible monitor to know for sure that it works. So despite NVIDIA announcing the G-Sync compatible program with just 12 supported monitors out of 400 tested, in reality, every adaptive sync monitor is now supported. All you have to do is enable the toggle and away you go. Sure, only certified monitors are guaranteed to work, but NVIDIA isn't restricting you to just G-Sync compatible monitors. Every FreeSync monitor should work. Now, NVIDIA, they did spend a bit of time during their keynote and on the show floor attempting to convince people that the G-Sync compatible program actually is necessary, because apparently non-certified monitors are rife with issues. They showed off monitors that were flickering and blanking, and basically used those examples to tarnish the entire FreeSync ecosystem. NVIDIA were effectively saying that the G-Sync compatible monitors they've certified do not have these issues, while any non-certified monitors will have issues, which is why you need to purchase a G-Sync compatible monitor. As soon as I saw NVIDIA talking about these issues, I immediately called BS, and that's because these issues they showed off are not issues with FreeSync or the VESA Adaptive Sync standard. They are not issues inherent to the technology. Instead, they are issues with monitor manufacturers producing a crappy product. It's no secret that some FreeSync monitors, especially earlier models, aren't very good and do indeed have issues like flickering even on AMD GPUs. But those monitors are pretty much just rubbish. In my opinion, if you receive a monitor that flickers or has blanking issues, it's a defective product that should be returned. There are plenty of monitors that don't have any such issues, so I wasn't a fan of NVIDIA claiming that non-certified monitors will definitely have these sorts of problems. Firstly, a quick look at how exactly you enable Adaptive Sync support for non-certified monitors. Once you've installed driver version 417.71 or newer, all you have to do is open up the NVIDIA control panel, browse to Setup G-Sync, then select your FreeSync monitor. From here, make sure both the Enable G-Sync, G-Sync Compatible checkbox and the Enable Settings for the Selected Display Model checkbox are both ticked. The second checkbox doesn't appear if the monitor is G-Sync certified. Then all you have to do is click Apply, your monitor will restart and Adaptive Sync will be enabled. In some cases, you might need to go into the global 3D settings and select G-Sync compatible from the Monitor Technology drop-down menu, but across the monitors I've tested, this wasn't necessary. It's also important to note that FreeSync has to be enabled in your monitor's on-screen menu. Some monitors have a toggle that allows you to turn FreeSync or Adaptive Sync on or off. You'll need to set it to on to get the option to enable Adaptive Sync. One final note about this before we get into the test results: G-Sync compatible and FreeSync monitors only work with NVIDIA's Pascal GPUs or newer. I tested a variety of monitors with an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti, but all Pascal cards should also work. This is different to G-Sync monitors, which work with GPUs back to NVIDIA's GeForce 600 series. I believe this is because Pascal is the first GPU architecture to support Adaptive Sync as well as G-Sync, while older architectures supported just G-Sync. So far, I've tested 7 FreeSync monitors with an NVIDIA GPU. All of these monitors I've previously tested and found to work flawlessly with AMD GPUs, so no flickering, blanking, or other issues. They pretty much work fine. I'd have loved to test more FreeSync monitors, considering there are over 500 models on the market, but these are all the monitors I have on hand right now. Still, I guess it's a pretty good sample size. The goal for testing was to see if there were any differences between Adaptive Sync enabled and disabled with an NVIDIA GPU, and if there were any differences compared to the monitor attached to an AMD GPU with FreeSync activated. This included testing the monitor across a range of refresh rates to see how it behaved inside and outside the refresh rate range. The first monitor I tested was the Acer KG251QF, a budget 24-inch 1080p monitor with a 30 to 144 Hz refresh rate range. This is a great monitor for the price, and it's safe to say I found no issues with the monitor working with Adaptive Sync enabled on an NVIDIA GPU. No flickering, no blanking, nothing. It worked exactly the same as when hooked up to an AMD GPU, so that's a success. The second monitor was the BenQ EL2870U, a 4K 60Hz panel with a narrow 40 to 60Hz refresh rate range. This monitor also worked perfectly, although the refresh range is too narrow to support low frame rate compensation or LFC. So when frame rates dropped below 40 FPS, adaptive sync no longer functioned, and either tearing or stuttering was introduced depending on whether you had VSync disabled or enabled. This is expected behavior though, and also happens with an AMD GPU. Again, I'd class this as a perfectly working display and as a success. The next monitor was the Viotech GN24C, another 24-inch 1080p monitor, this time with a VA panel and a 48 to 144 Hz refresh rate range. Again, this monitor worked perfectly, and due to the large refresh rate range, it also supported LFC. This was one feature I was curious to see whether it worked on NVIDIA GPUs or not. If NVIDIA was being lazy, they would just let adaptive sync deactivate when frame rates dropped below the 48 Hz refresh window. However, that's not the case. Instead, NVIDIA is properly supporting LFC with monitors that should support LFC, so when frame rates drop below 48 FPS, the monitor runs at a multiple of the frame rate and frames are duplicated. For example, if the game was running at 37 FPS, the monitor would refresh at 74 Hz and show each frame twice. So it's nice to see one of the key features of adaptive sync that NVIDIA already uses for G-Sync monitors also works here without any corners cut. I tested two other monitors with similar results, the AOC C27G1, which is a 27-inch 1080p monitor with a 48 to 144 Hz refresh range, and the Viotech GN32LD, a 32-inch 1440p monitor with a 48 to 144 Hz refresh range. Both monitors also worked perfectly and had functional LFC. Then we have the Philips Momentum 43, a 43-inch 4K monitor with a 48 to 60 Hz refresh range and HDR support. There's no LFC here due to the narrow refresh window, but otherwise this panel worked as expected with no issues. The good news here is that you get adaptive sync support even when HDR is enabled. It's not a matter of choosing one or the other. HDR has no impact on adaptive sync capabilities, which is good news for those interested in an HDR monitor but didn't want to buy a G-Sync display. There is one FreeSync monitor I tested that didn't work with adaptive sync on an NVIDIA GPU, but this isn't a huge surprise. The Viotech NB24C only supports adaptive sync through HDMI, while NVIDIA GPUs only support adaptive sync through DisplayPort. AMD GPUs can do adaptive sync through either HDMI or DisplayPort, so this monitor has functional adaptive sync with AMD GPUs but not NVIDIA GPUs. The lack of adaptive sync over HDMI will also disappoint those looking to pair an NVIDIA GPU with the range of FreeSync capable TVs that have been hitting the market in recent years. Most FreeSync TVs only have HDMI ports, so again, NVIDIA GPU owners will be left out for now. So of the 7 monitors I tested, 6 worked flawlessly as I expected. The one monitor that didn't work was never going to work because it required FreeSync over HDMI, which NVIDIA doesn't support. It's also good to verify that low frame rate compensation and HDR work in conjunction with adaptive sync on NVIDIA GPUs, just like on AMD GPUs. So there's no real difference between the FreeSync implementation on NVIDIA and on AMD graphics cards. I expect what I found here will be the case for the vast majority of FreeSync monitors. If the monitor is known to work perfectly with AMD GPUs over DisplayPort, so it doesn't have inherent flickering issues, it should also work perfectly with NVIDIA GPUs when you enable the toggle. If the monitor has issues on an NVIDIA GPU, it will also likely have issues on an AMD GPU and should be returned. I guess a question some people would be asking is, should the monitors I tested to work perfectly actually be certified as G-Sync compatible? And it's hard to say without knowing NVIDIA's strict testing guidelines. However, any monitor that doesn't support LFC will automatically fail NVIDIA's testing, and there are loads of FreeSync monitors without LFC, including 2 that I tested today. But I think it's important to stress that you don't need to purchase a G-Sync compatible monitor to get adaptive sync with your NVIDIA GPU. Buying a G-Sync compatible monitor will guarantee a working experience and guarantee support for features like LFC, but regular FreeSync monitors will work just fine as well, at least based on what I've seen today. Don't fall for the BS that all non-certified monitors will have issues, because that's definitely not true. As for a few loose ends, I don't have any monitors that actually qualify as G-Sync compatible, so I can't tell you how the experience differs compared to non-certified monitors. However, I expect the experience to be exactly the same considering the experience with non-certified FreeSync monitors is already excellent. Again, the G-Sync compatible badge just ensures a certain level of quality that you may not get with, say, the cheapest and crappiest FreeSync displays. If you're wondering about input lag, I measured no appreciable difference to input lag between Adaptive Sync enabled and disabled on NVIDIA GPUs. Enabling Adaptive Sync does not appear to increase GPU side processing time, which is also the case for AMD GPUs, so that's good news as well. You can use multiple Adaptive Sync displays hooked up to a single NVIDIA GPU. You're not limited to just one Adaptive Sync enabled display. However, Adaptive Sync will only function on one monitor at a time. I don't expect this to be an issue for most people, but say you have 2 games running on 2 separate Adaptive Sync displays, only one of those monitors will be fed an Adaptive Sync signal from its corresponding game. I also haven't tested any FreeSync 2 monitors because I don't have any on hand. Because FreeSync 2 is an HDR pipeline exclusive to AMD that allows the game to talk directly to the monitor for lower latency HDR processing, I don't expect this functionality to work with NVIDIA GPUs. However, this won't stop regular HDR from working in conjunction with Adaptive Sync on NVIDIA GPUs, as I've already mentioned. So those that own or are thinking of buying a FreeSync 2 monitor will get HDR functionality, just not FreeSync 2 HDR functionality in the limited selection of games that support it. Finally, I think NVIDIA supporting FreeSync is, well, it's nothing but a good thing for the industry and consumers in general. It did take NVIDIA quite some time to do so, and I'm not a fan of NVIDIA basically calling all FreeSync monitors garbage in the process, but this will bring cheaper Adaptive Sync monitors to owners of the most popular GPUs on the market. I really don't see a reason anymore to buy a G-Sync display if there's a FreeSync equivalent. And I guess that's it for this one. If you also have a FreeSync display and an NVIDIA GPU, I'd love to hear how you're finding the experience, so leave a comment below. I'm also interested to see if there are many people with displays that do have issues with Adaptive Sync enabled, especially if those issues are not present on AMD GPUs or aren't a known issue with that particular model. As always, you can subscribe for more Hardware Unboxed content. Give it a like if you enjoyed the video. Consider supporting us on Patreon to get access to our exclusive Discord chat, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Guys. Throwing a flashbang. I'm throwing a flashbang.
Many of you, I presume, have seen Breaking Bad. And that's a really good example of the incorporation, at least in part, or maybe the possession by the shadow from the Jungian perspective, right? Because you have this ordinary high school teacher who really thinks that he's an axe, and his family as well. You know, like your typical persona, roughly speaking. He's just a normal guy. But part of the reason that he's a normal guy is because he actually hasn't been put in abnormal circumstances, and then all of a sudden he is. And he has a genuine moral conundrum, right? He's going to die of lung cancer, and he has a son who's got a lot of health problems. And
just let's show them we mean business. That's what. Oh, thank. Don't rush, don't rush.
he's terrified that he's going to leave his wife and his child behind with nothing. And then, of course, as the story, and so he decides to do something that temporarily that he regards as what they would normally regard as reprehensible. And of course, he just gets tangled up in that. But then as the story unfolds, you see that it's more complicated, because it's not that he was just innocent, good guy and he decided to turn bad. He's also very resentful and angry. And it's partly because he's a bit of a pushover at the beginning, or maybe more than a bit of a pushover. And also that he didn't really fulfill his own potential, and that, you know, he had friends who walked down the entrepreneurial path, and maybe they weren't quite fair to him, but whatever, he ends up not very successful as a high school teacher. And so he's really angry about that. And so there's more motivation for him opening up the door to the terrible elements of his personality than just the fact that he's got good motivations to do so. And that unfolds, you know, and so you see the warps and twists in his resentment. Character increasingly manifests themselves as he walks down this road to really total brutality, and it's quite good. There's a book called Ordinary Men that's a lot like that. I don't think I've mentioned that to you before, but Ordinary Men is a book about, it's the best book of its type. Maybe it's the only book of its type. It's possible, but it's plotted much like Breaking Bad in some sense. It's a story about these German policemen in early stages of World War II. And they were guys who were old enough to be raised in Germany really before the Hitlerian propaganda came out in full force. You know, if you were a teenager, say in the 1930s, you were going to be pulled right into the propaganda machine, and maybe you were part of the Hitler Youth, and like you were raised in that, you know. But if you were older, then you were raised before that, and you're not as amenable to propaganda once you're older than about, well, I would say about 22 or something like that. It's pretty young, actually. If you're going to make a soldier, you have to get the soldier young, because once people are in their early 20s, say, they already have their personality developed. Anyways, these policemen were sent into Poland after the Germans marched through, and you know, it was wartime, and there was this hypothesis in Germany that the Jews in particular were operating as a fifth column and undermining the German war effort, because of course the Germans blamed the Jews and a variety of other people for actually setting up the conditions that made the war necessary. And so when the police were sent into Poland, they were also required to make peace, roughly speaking. And so they started out by rounding up all the Jewish men between 18 and 65 and gathering them in stadiums and then shipping them off on the trains. But that isn't where they ended. They ended in a very, very dark place. I mean, these guys were going out in the field with naked pregnant women and shooting them in the back of the head by the end of their training. And what's really interesting about that is that their commander told them that they could go home at any time. So this is not one of those examples of people following orders. And the reason they didn't, roughly speaking, there's many reasons, but one of the reasons they didn't is because they didn't think it was comradely, so to speak, to leave the guys they were working with to do all the dirty work and run off. You know, and that's really an interesting fact, you know, because in different circumstances you wouldn't think about that as reprehensible, right? You'd think, well, that's part of teamwork and under rough circumstances, and that's at least in part how they viewed it. And they were also made physically ill multiple times, physically and psychologically ill by the things that they had to do, but they kept doing them anyways. So it's one step at a time, and that's the thing, is that you end up in very bad places one step at a time, so you've got to watch those steps. Anyways, Pinocchio has now decided, after his latest misadventure, to return to the proper pathway. He's off to school again, and he's still pretty naive, although perhaps not as much so as he was before, and so he decides that he's going to do things right. He's going to go get educated. He's going back to school. He's going to take the conventional route to discipline and be a good boy, roughly speaking. And so he's off to school, and the fox waylays him again. This is a really interesting scene. It took me quite a long time to unpack this too. And so the fox, first of all, starts out by acting like he's sympathetic again, sympathetic towards Pinocchio. And so he's empathetic, you could say. And so this is an interesting analysis of empathy. So what happens is the fox convinces Pinocchio through a variety of maneuvers that he's actually not feeling very well, that he's sick. He really convinces him that he's a victim. And one of the things, I had a graduate student named Maja Djikic who had worked with the UN in Bosnia, and she had toured some of the mass grave sites there. And we wrote a paper one time called "You Can Neither Remember Nor Forget What You Don't Understand." And it was a paper about the idea, for example, it was partly about the idea that we should never forget the Holocaust, and that the idea there is that, well, we should never forget it and we shouldn't repeat it. But the thing is, if you don't understand how those things come about, you can't really remember them, right? You think about them as a set of historical facts, but that's not the kind of remembering that actually makes any difference. You have to understand the causal pathways. You have to understand how a society would transform in that manner. And more importantly, you have to understand the role of the individuals within that society, unless you're going to assume that they're so completely unlike you that there's no connection whatsoever, in which case you haven't remembered it at all. You haven't learned anything at all, because the right lesson from what happened in the 20th century is this is what human beings are like. That's the correct lesson. And you can say, well, not me, but you should, but probably you too. That's the thing, probably. And probably me too, at least under normal circumstances. Anyways, the fox convinces Pinocchio that he's sick. He performs a lot of tricks to do this. Now, you could say that Pinocchio is susceptible to this because maybe there's still part of him that's looking for the easy way out. And so one of the things that Maya and I found when we were writing this paper, we were looking at the discourse that precedes genocide in genocidal states, and the enhancement of a sense of victimization on the part of one of the groups, usually the group that's going to commit the genocide. First of all, their sense of being victims is much heightened by the demagogues who are trying to stir up this sort of hatred. So they basically say, look, you've been oppressed in a variety of ways, and these are the people who did it, and they're not going to stop doing it, and this time we're going to get them before they get us. It's something like that. And so there's something very pathological about the enhancement of victimization, which is Well, see, the problem as far as I'm concerned with it is it's not thought through very well. Because there's a point that's being made, and the point is that people have been oppressed and they suffer. And that's true, that point. But then the proper framework from within which to interpret that, I believe, is that that's characteristic of life. You can't take it personally in some sense. And you can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims. And you certainly can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims and then assume that you're only in the victim class and then assume that that gives you certain, like, access to certain forms of redress, let's say. It gets dangerous very rapidly if you do that sort of thing. So, for example, one of the things that characterized the Soviet Union, and this was particularly true in the 1920s, but afterwards, so the Soviets were very much enamored of the idea of class guilt. So, for example, although it was only about 40 years previously that the serfs had been emancipated, they weren't much more than slaves, right? And so that was the bulk of the Russian population. They were bought and sold along with the land. So they had been emancipated, and some of them, many of them, had turned into independent farmers, and some of them had become reasonably prosperous because, at least in principle, crooked, but I presume a larger proportion from actually being able to raise food. And of course, at that time, the bulk of the Russian food population was produced by these relatively successful peasant farmers. And relatively successful would mean maybe they had a brick house or something, and maybe they had a couple of cows, and maybe they were able to hire a few people. And so, you know, it wasn't like they were massive landowners or anything.
Terrorists win. Remember, keep the hostages safe. I'm throwing smoke. I'm throwing a flashbang. Throwing a flashbang. Terrorists win. I know how much you hate him, so let's do this. Flashbang. Smoke.
Are you rolling? Are you JK?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm JK.
So, Simo,
yeah.
You're gonna have to hold up. This bike is really not very powerful on its high elevation.
Yeah, I'm just
stuff.
at the scene.
It's a
we
beautiful
are
scene.
like 4,000 meters up, and it is getting very high.
Terrorists win. Let's go, guys. I'm throwing a flashbang. Terrorists win.
Orange, I will kill you. Fuck you. Hungarian king.
We gotta move, guys.
Hungarian. Magyar.
I'm throwing smoke. Throwing a flashbang. Throwing a flashbang. Fire in the hole.
Orange rush.
Terrorists win.
Nice, man. Nice. I am good with pistol. We all going with pistol.
Be careful. Let's all make it home tonight.
You are not Hungarian. You're
Follow me.
Full headshot.
Escorting the hostages.
Orange, your name is Germanic. You are German. Not. Hungarian, German. Not Hungarian, German. Knife him, knife him. Knife. Knife him.
Oh my god. That's so ridiculous.
Let's move out.
I've lived inside. Think I'll get you. Oh.
What are you doing?
I will get you. MFP. Your MFP is mine.
What?
Your MFP is mine.
Okay. You are a communist?
Yes, communist.
Fire in the hole. Molotov.
Thank you, my friend. Let's rush, rush. Follow me.
Wait a second.
Flashbang.
Get hostage.
Flashbang.
Hostage. Fine.
Fuck.
This way. On your language.
Sorry. Yeah.
Flashbang.
Thanks.
Flashbang.
Hard to ride your bike because it is carbureted?
Yeah, you're on a fuel-injected scooter.
It seems to be doing okay.
You know, yeah, you're doing okay. You know, I actually went to university in China.
Okay.
And I've been getting a lot of questions from people who've been thinking about, you know, maybe coming and studying in China. And they want to know what it's like to study in a Chinese university and if they should do it or not, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
So I thought we could talk a bit about it because you taught at a university
Yeah, I
at
did.
some point, right?
Professor Tai.
Yeah.
Lock and load.
Sorry.
Use MP.
Coming out. Throwing a grenade.
That's it. That's. That's skill.
Alright, can you add me? Please.
What?
Add me.
Add you.
Throwing flashbang.
Professor
Milk.
Tai. Okay, yeah, Professor Milk. And there's a new law, apparently, and of course it's one of those things I'll have to see it before I believe it, but apparently university students, for the first time ever, foreign students, are going to be allowed to do part-time work in China.
Okay.
And I have a very good explanation as to why, but we'll get into that a little later. But let's just say, well, let me pose the question to you.
Sure.
Let's go.
If someone was to come and study in a Chinese university, what subjects should they study? What subjects should they get a bachelor's in or whatever?
I wouldn't come to a Chinese university to study unless it was for like a year.
No, but if you were, like,
okay,
what
if
subject?
I was, if I'm popping over to China, I'm gonna study there. Maybe Tsinghua or Fudan or whatever. I would. What would I study?
Yeah,
I'd study Chinese. I think that would be the most
that
useful.
is the only thing you should study. And if anyone is thinking of studying anything other than Chinese, they're a moron.
Okay, that's pretty
So
nice of you to say.
I was setting you up, but you chose right.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate your quiz.
Yeah.
So look at your bike. Sounds like it's gonna die.
It's so bad. So basically, you know, if you do study in China, think about it. If you went and you got your bachelor's degree in, I don't know, like science in China,
right?
And then you went overseas and you tried to use that in your resume, they'd be like, "What? You got a science degree in China?"
Yeah, it doesn't really count.
No, it's like, is that fake? Did you buy it? You know, what's going on? But a degree in Chinese, the best place to get it is China.
Obviously,
because, you know, that's where it comes from. And if I got a degree in Chinese in America, I wouldn't take it seriously.
No.
You know, but okay, so basically you want to study Chinese. Now, I actually went and studied Chinese, and I did pretty well. I studied there, you know, for a number of months, like 6 months, actually more like a year. And the thing is, student life was actually pretty good.
Is it?
You know, like you start at about 8:30 in the morning, and then you finish at 12, and that's kind of just your university day.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you could take extra classes if you want and stuff.
Yeah,
but,
if you wanted an actual degree.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that was a degree course. I could have continued with it until
Right. But I mean, you'd have.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, the thing is, it's fairly pleasant, you know. In China, there's a weird situation where high school is incredibly stressful, and primary school. You could talk about that because you did the teaching.
Yeah, so in my experience, I one of my best jobs was to teach at a university. I taught journalism in Inner Mongolia, and then computer science as well, and then computer science in Huizhou down in Guangdong. And that was actually my major. The journalism thing was one of those, might as well say it's a white monkey job, because like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
There's like a real bike behind it, a real scooter.
Wow, look at him go. Anyway, it was very awesome, like very low hours. And the students were hilarious because the ones that make it to university have the most ridiculously lazy, easygoing life because they have just slaved away. Like, kids are committing suicide over high school Gaokao exams and stuff. That's how hard it is. And then they go to university and there's like a 99% pass rate. Because once you're in and you pay the tuition, you're kind of, it doesn't matter. Like, I used to have kids that just wouldn't even show up. I had this kid in Inner Mongolia. The first class, he was smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer in the back of the classroom.
Wow.
Inner Mongolia is a bit different, but at the same time, it was kind of like shocking. And then he stopped coming to class.
Wow.
And then
dedication. Imagine cycling up here. Sorry, anyway,
he tried, Jesus.
Good job, man.
He tried to bribe me to not fail him with a carton of cigarettes at the
Go, people.
The end of the semester. And the thing is, I didn't have the power to fail him, right? Anyway, that's how easy it is and nice it is for university students.
I feel we did talk about this before in one of our episodes.
We have,
yeah, we have. But it is like that, and even when I did my English, my Chinese language course, in the exams, they were kind of reading out the answers for us.
Right.
You know, because they don't want you to fail.
No, it makes them look bad.
You know, like, things like primary school's compulsory in China and it's free, right?
Right.
But then university, it's all about making money, and so if they lose a reputation, they lose clients. So, you know, they'll make sure that everyone passes. Anyway, let's get on to the this bike. Let's get on to this whole thing about you know, foreigners coming here. You will be able to work apparently, and I've figured it out. You know, they've made it so difficult to get. Oh, that's beautiful up there. It's so beautiful. I love this riding up here. Anyway, you just gotta watch out for the traffic. They've made it so difficult to get visas now, like legitimate work visas for people seeking them. They've got that whole, you need an HSK, you know, this and that,
and the class-based system
ABC,
for foreigners,
foreigner, or whatever. And they've made it so difficult that legitimate English teachers that would have done a good job, the people that are enthusiastic and want to do it, are just not bothered anymore because they go to Japan or South Korea or Vietnam, Thailand instead.
Better work stability, like job stability, better living.
And they don't need to worry about these stringent, like ridiculous requirements.
Not cheating, but reporting.
Let's go, let's go.
At me or die.
Just don't rush.
Minus 67.
Hostages coming out. Escorting the hostages.
If fearless play painfully die, we win.
Grab your gear, let's go.
Back. Fucking cheater.
For what is basically one of the easiest, you know, like, jobs.
Right. Oh my god, they're looking down
we are so high up. No wonder this poor bike's struggling. So anyway, there's suddenly a massive shortage of English teachers as a result.
Right.
And the only people that are willing to work are illegals. So, you know, like people that don't even speak English from sort of the Baltic states and stuff are ending up teaching there.
Right.
So I think to combat this, they've now, as usual, China has to knee-jerk reaction and be like, we need to make a plan. I know what we can do.
Right.
How about we take advantage of the foreign students that are, you know, learning here? Let's get them to teach the, you know, in the kindergarten. So I think that's what's happening.
They can pay them lower salaries.
Yeah,
they're educated kids, so they're probably better qualified than your average slug.
And they could keep a close eye on them as well, you know.
Right.
It's
an interesting development. But
watch
yeah,
out,
like
there's a cycle guy. Don't block him, dude.
Sorry.
Poor guy. Now you have to stop. He was on a roll.
Well.
Minus 26.
Wait for both dying.
Roger that. Move it.
Not my fault.
It's totally your fault. I got it on camera.
Shut up. There's cars in front of me.
Wow, like I'm breathing and it's misting up my helmet. How's your Bernie Sanders in this cold?
It's actually much better. We're actually riding into the clouds right now, guys.
Yeah, look at that.
We're in a cloud.
Gorgeous. Look at that mist going uphill.
Right.
It's normally the other way around.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, what the heck? What's going on?
Yeah, it's so gorgeous up here. So yeah, guys, university, if you want to study in China, yeah, go study Chinese. It's actually quite an experience, you know, it's fun. I made a lot of friends. You know, there's a big sort of fun barbecue and drinking culture that's attached to it with the students.
You can also study Chinese in Taiwan, though, and I would almost recommend that more because I think the accent's much better here.
Yeah,
I like the Mandarin.
And again, they've always allowed students to work here. But in mainland China, I'm saying they're now allowing it.
Right.
Or apparently they're going to be allowing it. So it could be quite an attractive, you know, option.
You know what's weird? This is a funny thing.
Yeah.
I was in Taiwan. I was in Taipei with Vivi.
Yeah.
And we were at like some American chain restaurant. I think it's Chili's or something. And there were white, you know, student workers, like waitresses and stuff.
That's so weird.
And to imagine that in China, that can never happen in China.
No, they don't allow. You're not allowed to be a waiter.
Right.
You know, the only jobs you can take in China are highly skilled jobs, and that only a Chinese person can't do.
Right. That's why they offer you have to have foreign experts in your field.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why you'll never see, like in Japan, you see Indian people and white people at the 7-Elevens and stuff.
Right.
Which is also bizarre for me because, you know, it's just so opposite to China. Wow, that's cool. Going on a quad.
Yeah, what's he doing with that though?
May as well have a car at that point.
Yeah,
but anyway. Okay, I mean, we're dragging this on.
Yeah, anyway, sorry guys.
Yeah, say something.
It's just kind of interesting to ride through here, so.
It's beautiful. I'm glad we're getting it on camera.
Yeah.
Although it's all misty and stuff.
It's cloudy.
Oh man, this poor bike. Yeah, so what do you want to say to our subscribers before we sign off?
Whether you are a university graduate, a current student, or someone who's working their ass off out in the real world.
Yeah.
I'd like most Chinese college students. So, I implore you to like, comment, subscribe if you like the video. Tell us your experience in the comment section. Did you go to school? What was it like? Was it hard for you? What was harder, high school or university? And let us know.
Yep. And you know what, before we finish, I got to say one thing. When I was actually attending that university, I spotted a friend of mine, or an acquaintance of mine, on the campus, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, I teach here." And I was like,
super funny.
Like, "What?" Because I know the guy, first of all, is like a school dropout from British high school.
Oh wow. Okay.
He was there illegally on like a tourist visa or something, and I'm like, how on earth does he end up getting a job in the university? But I have a feeling
that's weird. Usually those are very strict.
You know why though? His wife had some kind of admin position in the university. So
that'll do it. That'll do it.
Anyway, the thing is, I have a feeling that if you do go study at a university, you won't have to go far to find a job, because they'll probably put you in as like an English teacher in that university or something.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
So anyway, whether you are someone who believes in higher education, or someone who studies STEM or the liberal arts, or what is that, like gender athletes
underwater
studies?
basket weaving.
Yeah, there we go. We love you all the same. So until next time, you know the drill. As always, unlike this bike at this very high altitude, which is going like 10 k's an hour, stay awesome.
You probably weren't expecting to see me standing in a room after just seeing both myself and Seamilk riding through some of the most awesome mountain scenery in Taiwan. Well, here I am, because I have a couple of messages for you. Number one, I know there are a couple of you people out there who support both myself and Seamilk on Patreon, one or the other. I know there are a couple of
No już.